What's up, Duke fans, and welcome to another episode of Duke Blue Central. Very exciting episode coming at you today with a full bracket breakdown and prediction. There is going to be an audio version of this episode, but there's also going to be a video version. So if you're listening on any of your podcast sites, you're welcome to keep listening, obviously. But I'm going to be going through these picks. Kind of just sharing my screen with you as I fill out this bracket. This is the bracket episode where I'm going to be giving you my predictions for what's going to go down in the 2024 National Championship Final Four in Phoenix bracket. So without further ado, let's just get into this. Yeah, the simple episode for this. This is I'm going to be filling out my bracket. Some of the picks might be with my heart instead of my head, but we're going to fill it out regardless. Give you some predictions here, and then we can all turn around and see how wrong I was at the end of this whole thing. So let's get started. We're going to start in the East. In the East, first matchup, we're going to be going UConn over Stetson. UConn is maybe the most complete-looking team right now in all of college basketball. They're going to be tough to beat, tough out in this tournament. So obviously, I think they're going to go over the number 16 Stetson. FAU versus Northwestern is the next matchup. Seen a lot of people picking FAU here. I'm actually going to go Northwestern. They're a good three-point shooting team, a team that can get hot from three in the tournament, and I think that that is invaluable in March when you're trying to get wins in these tournaments. If you can get hot and shoot really well, I think that is it's a recipe for success. And in similar fashion, the next matchup, the 5 seed San Diego State versus the 12 seed UAB. I'm also going to be picking UAB for a similar reason, somewhat similar reason. They shoot the ball pretty well, but they are excellent at getting to the foul line, and they convert a high number of free throws. And I think that against an opponent that's not quite too advanced yet is going to really help UAB pull out a win in this first round against San Diego State. Next matchup in the East, the 4 seed Auburn Tigers versus the 13 seed Yale Bulldogs. I'm going to take Auburn here. Nothing too complicated. Auburn tore through the SEC championship tournament with ease. I like them to beat Yale in the first round. Next pick here, BYU is the 6th seed versus Duquesne. I'm going to be picking BYU. Maybe perhaps a little bit of a spoiler alert for this entire tournament. I really like BYU going into this bracket. They're a team, look, to not maybe this is a risky, high risk, high reward. BYU is an excellent shooting team. They have shooters all over the floor, and I just feel like those teams are the ones that can typically get hot and make a deep run in the tournament. I like BYU a lot this year. Illinois, the Big Ten champion of this year, after Purdue was upset, Illinois was able to finish off Wisconsin in the Big Ten National Championship to make a run. I'm very wary, and you're going to see this as I go through my bracket. I'm extremely wary about picking teams that have gotten hot and won their conference tournament to advance that far, but they are going to have enough to get by Morehead State. Next matchup, Washington State versus Drake. I'm going to be taking Drake in this matchup. Another good shooting team that has won a ton of games. They are not in a wonderful conference here. Let's not get it twisted. They're in the same conference as the Indiana State Sycamores, which is a team I think it's a team a lot of people wanted to see in the bracket, but they're a really strong offensive team, and I tend to err towards really strong offensive teams in the tournament just because of their ability to just put up huge numbers at will that other teams just frankly can't keep track of. Next, the number 2 seed Iowa State versus South Dakota State. Going with Iowa State here. I really like this Iowa State team. They've shown a propensity to be pretty good everywhere they're at. They play good defense. They rely a lot. They rely on turning the other team over, but it's something they really aggressively go after steals. So I'm looking forward to watching Iowa State perform in this year's tourney. All right, we're gonna go round at a time here. So I'm not going to finish out the East. I'm going to jump to the West, do all the first round, and then continue on. So the first round in the West, we start out with the number 1 seed North Carolina Tar Heels, and an opponent we're extremely familiar with, facing off against Wagner. That game happened tonight against Wagner and Howard. I was hoping Howard could pull it out, but they couldn't. Had a couple opportunities at the end. Well, we're not going to overcomplicate this. UNC is going to beat 16 seed Wagner. Number 9 seed Michigan State versus number 8 seed Mississippi State is next up after them. I'm going to go with Michigan State here. Tom Izzo is a legendary head coach for a reason. I think he'll have his guys ready to have some sort of performance in the NCAA tournament. Next matchup, St. Mary's versus Grand Canyon. Going upset here with the 12 seed, going Grand Canyon over St. Mary's. I like some of what I've seen from Grand Canyon this year. The St. Mary's is very hot going into this tournament. They just won their conference tournament. They haven't lost a ton of games, but I like the way that Grand Canyon plays. They're efficient on both sides of the floor, and I think against a team that maybe looks too confident going into March, I like them upsetting St. Mary's. Alabama versus Charleston. I just think Alabama can score too much for a lot of these teams. Clemson versus New Mexico. This is one a lot of people are picking the upset here for good reason. New Mexico is an excellent team and pretty rough draw for Clemson to get them as an 11 seed. But I'm actually going to stick with Clemson here. I'm going to stick with some ACC choice throughout some of these games, and I think Clemson has the talent enough to get by New Mexico, and I think they're going to hear this kind of underdog talk in their ear, and that's going to hopefully encourage them more to where they can get a good win and represent the ACC well. Baylor, Colgate. I think Baylor's too athletic, too talented for a team like Colgate. Not going to overcomplicate that pick. Next, number 7, Dayton versus number 10, Nevada. I'm going to go Dayton here. Don't have too much intel on either one of these teams, but I'm going to go Dayton. And Arizona will beat Long Beach State. Long Beach State, by the way, incredible story to end the year with their head coach. In case you hadn't heard, their head coach basically several days before their conference tournament was informed he was going to be fired, but they allowed him to coach the rest of the year just to finish it out with his guys, and they went on a magical run to win their conference tournament and earn a bid to the NCAA tournament. So I'm sure that admin room is a little awkward in Long Beach State, but I think his coaching career there will come to an end against Arizona. I think Arizona is an awesome team and has the ability to make it very far in this tournament. Next, we're going to the South. This is Duke's region, but we're going to start with the Houston Cougars beating Longwood. Not gonna pick a 16 over a 1. It's not happening. I'm gonna go. The next matchup is Nebraska, a number 8 seed, versus Texas A&M, a number 9 seed. And I'm picking Nebraska here. Nebraska is an electric team to watch, by the way. In case you haven't seen them, they've got some guys who can just shoot the crap out of the ball, and I'm excited to watch them in this March Madness tournament, and I think they could get hot, and I think they'll certainly have enough firepower to win this game, maybe even another one. Wisconsin versus James Madison. I'm going to go for another 5 over 12 matchup here, upset here in James Madison. That's, let's see, 1, 2. I think I picked every 12 so far. So it's a good year. If this holds true, it'll be a good year to be the 12 seed. I like the Dukes. I think Wisconsin is one of those teams that just got hot and was able to make kind of a magic run to the Big Ten championship. But before that, they went on a big losing streak of games, and I think the emotions of being in a game like that is going to get to them, and they're not going to show up and show out. And I think James Madison, a team that will be hungry for an NCAA tournament win, will come snatch it from them. And then the next round, they'll be facing the Duke Blue Devils, because if you think, listen, this is a Duke podcast. Did you really think I was going to pick Vermont over Duke in the first round? No, I think Vermont is a good team, is a good 13 seed for Duke to play, but I think their lack of size is really going to hurt them and their lack of they don't defend the pick and roll all that well, which is I think something in particular Jeremy Roach is going to eat them alive on. Obviously excited to watch Duke play in this tournament, and I think we're going to get by Vermont. Next matchup, Texas Tech, 6 seed versus the 11 seed NC State Wolfpack, who made a magic run to win the ACC. And I think generally I don't. And I've shuffled back and forth on this game a couple times. Generally, I don't pick the teams that make a magic run and win their conference tournament to win any games in the NCAA. It's just typically how it shakes out. But I think with this NC State team, they've really found something. So I'm going to pick them over Texas Tech, at least in this first round, to win a game in the NCAA tournament in a year where just a couple weeks ago they were definitely out. For me, it's great to see NC State in this March Madness season, and I hope I'll be rooting for them to get a win over Texas Tech, Red Raiders. Next matchup is Kentucky versus Oakland. Kentucky, to me, is truly one of the most interesting teams in this year's bracket. When they are on, I mean, it feels like you're watching an NBA team. The guys can shoot. They're really athletic. They have 2 potential top 5 draft picks, 2 even of the potential top 3, depending on how this March goes. But, man, when they are off, they can lose to UNC Wilmington. And Oakland is not a bad team. Oakland is a team that Kentucky is going to have to show up to beat. And it's just so hard to predict what they're going to do because of their somewhat hills and valleys in this year. But I do think they just have too much overwhelming talent for Oakland to handle. But if we're sitting here talking about Oakland winning that game, I'm not horribly surprised. But just as well on the other side, if Kentucky is in the Final Four or Elite Eight, you're not horribly surprised either. They're in a really strange position going into the year. Next, we have the 7 seed Florida Gators versus the 10 seed, which is either going to be Colorado or Boise State. They play tomorrow, so that'll be determined there. I think I'm actually going to pick the 10 seed here, either Colorado or Boise. I think Florida has had a good run. They're a team that scores a lot of points, but I think that it's just. They had a pretty rough injury happen the last game of the SEC championship game, and I don't know that they're going to be able to recover from that. I don't believe he was too key a player, but I don't think they'll be able to shake that feeling of losing a player like that. And if Florida's a team where if they have an off night, they can look really bad, and I think that's going to happen in the first round. Marquette, Western Kentucky. I don't trust that Marquette is fully healthy. Their point guard and their star player, Tyler Kalinick, went down and missed the end of the regular season as well as the entire conference tournament. And I just don't know how healthy he's going to be. Is it going to be enough to get by Western Kentucky? I think so, but I don't think it fares well for Marquette looking forward. Next to the Midwest, where Purdue is the 1 seed, and they will get a win over the 16th seed. I would like to think they have exercised those demons from last year and will not get upset like this again. Next, we're going with the next matchup in that bracket is Utah State versus TCU. I'll go for TCU. Don't know too much about either one of these teams. I like the 9 seed over the 8 seed, and TCU has played in more competitive games, even getting a win over Houston at one point in the year, so I'll go with them. Gonzaga versus, I've heard this pronounced McNeese State. I've heard it McNeese. We're going to go with McNeese. I think that's the correct way to say it. But yeah, I'm going with the upset again. 12 over 5. That's maybe my biggest thing for this year. All the 5 seeds are getting beat. I just like the matchup here. I don't think Gonzaga is that good. I've never been high on Gonzaga at all in any tournament, but especially when they're already playing that weak conference. And on top of that, they don't have the talent to get them through the opening rounds this year. Give me McNeese. Sorry, no disrespect, but I'm picking you to win. Kansas-Samford, I've seen a lot of people, believe it or not, pick Samford. Kansas is another team where I don't necessarily trust their health. I know they said, they were resting guys in their conference tournament for maybe precautionary reasons, but doesn't seem like a great reason to rest two of your starters. And if either one of those guys, either Dickinson or the other guy, can't remember his name, miss any amount of time, Kansas is not a deep team at all. They'll be in deep, deep trouble. I do think they'll get by Samford, but boy, does it not look great for them if those guys can't get healthy. South Carolina, Oregon, actually going to go Oregon over South Carolina here. I think South Carolina is too up and down. They have had an ability to just get blown out in some games, and I like a hot Oregon team to upset them in the first round. Creighton versus Akron. Akron had a crazy end to the year. In case you didn't see, they really shouldn't even be in this tournament. But they were playing Kent State, I believe, in their conference tournament final. The Kent State player shot it, and they made it to go up one with about 5 seconds left. So Kent State was up one over Akron with about 5 seconds left. And then one of the players for Kent State got confused on the time and score of the game. And when Akron inbounded the ball, he fouled him, so that as if he was trying to foul him to get him to shoot free throws to shot the clock, except they were ahead. And then Akron just stepped up, made 2 free throws, and they won. Feel bad for Kent State, and I think Akron will meet their end at the very first round of this tournament. I'm going with Creighton. Texas over Colorado State. Colorado State just defeated the Virginia Cavaliers in embarrassing fashion for Virginia and the ACC. But I'm still going to be going with the Longhorns here. I think I believe it's Max Asmith is an excellent player for them, a player who performs during March, made that deep run with Oral Roberts not too long ago, and Duke actually saw him at Oral Roberts last year in our very first round tournament game. But I'm going with Texas. Next up, Tennessee versus St. Peter's. I don't think I'm going to go with the upset here. I think Tennessee with Dalton Connect is just too good for a St. Peter's team, and I don't like the team making a miracle run twice. Maybe they're the new Butler. I don't know. All right, we're going back up to the East for our second round picks. These are going to get faster as we go. UConn, number 1 seed versus the number 9 seed, Northwestern. I'm going to go UConn here. Not overcomplicate this. UConn is an excellent team. And it's hard to pick against them in any game, really. Next, we got kind of an Alabama State matchup between UAB and Auburn. I'm going to go for Auburn. I think UAB is, again, pretty good at getting to the line and getting free throws. Auburn is a team that's just too powerful offensively and defensively, has too much star power for UAB compared to what San Diego State has in the first round. BYU versus Illinois. Going BYU. The 6th seed BYU is going to make the Sweet 16. I love their shooting. I love how they play. I think Illinois is going to run out of gas eventually from all the effort they expended winning the Big Ten championship, and I like BYU a lot in this spot. 2 seed Iowa State versus the 10 seed Drake. This has a potential to be a better game than most people think. The one thing that worries me with Iowa State, and I really like them, by the way, there's a world in which I see them in the Final Four, and I think in like some of my other kind of competitive brackets, I even have them in the Final Four. But they are going to have enough to beat Drake. I am going to go ahead and predict them moving forward. Maybe the only thing that concerns me about them long term is their ability to perhaps not do any one thing excellently, but just be great to good at everything. Sometimes that actually hurts you in the tournament because you're not able to just exploit a team's weakness like a team like a Purdue who does like one thing very, very well, which is get the ball inside to Zach Edey. But they'll have enough to beat Drake, I think. Next, the 1-9 matchup in the West between the 1 seed North Carolina Tar Heels and the 9 seed Michigan State Spartans. I'm going to go North Carolina here. I think Tom Izzo will make this game close, but I think the talent of North Carolina, in particular RJ Davis, will continue to be successful in the tournament. Grand Canyon versus Alabama. What an interesting matchup this is. But I just think Alabama, again, they can score 90 points in any given game. I don't think Grand Canyon can do that regardless of how well they can play on defense. They're not going to be able to keep up with Alabama. Clemson versus Baylor. Interesting game here. This is a game Clemson could absolutely win from a talent perspective. They have have pretty talented players. I don't know if they're going to be able to match Baylor's athleticism. This is another tough one where I've gone back and forth several times. I just think Baylor just edges Clemson out in this game. I think they make a valiant effort at it, and I can easily see them winning this thing. But I just don't know if the coaching experience is going to be there at this level of the tournament against this level of a team that has this many athletes. I just give the slight edge to Baylor here. Arizona, Dayton. I really like Arizona going into this tournament, and I think they'll make short work of Dayton. All right, we're back up to the South. This is to make the Sweet 16. Houston versus Nebraska. Boy, do I want to pick Nebraska in this game. Let me just tell you how bad I want to pick Nebraska. And there is a world where Nebraska gets hot and they could kick Houston's butt and win by 15 and 20 if they're on shooting. Houston's one of those teams that, like, if you can score 70 plus on them, you're probably going to win. And if Nebraska has an on shooting night, they will score 70 pretty much no matter how you defend them. But it's one of those things that's like, if they play 10 times, Nebraska might get a great shooting night 2 of the 10 nights. So I have to go with the majority and say that Houston is going to be able to defend them well enough to move on. But man, do I want to pick Nebraska for this game. Next, we've got our Duke Blue Devils, the 4 seed, playing the James Madison Dukes, the 12 seed. Duke on Duke's matchup, and I'm going to go with the singular Duke. I'm going to pick Duke, of course. I think Duke's talent level is going to be too much for James Madison. That's the talent gap between a team like Wisconsin and Duke. No disrespect to Wisconsin, but the level of players that Duke has is just going to be too much for Houston, I think. Next, NC State versus Kentucky. I'm going to go Kentucky. Like I just said, Kentucky's a fascinating team. They could be hot or cold. I'm kind of betting on them to be hot to a certain degree in this tournament. That could come back to bite me in the butt, and they could lose to Oakland, and you never know what's going to happen. But again, I think they'll ride that wave, at least to a certain extent, in this tournament. Next up, we've got Colorado or Boise. Depending on who wins tonight, picking that 10 seed regardless against Marquette. Again, I don't have a lot of faith in Marquette's ability to be healthy, but I just think it'll be enough to get by whoever they're playing next. I'm going with Marquette. Next, Purdue versus TCU. TCU is a team that could upset Purdue. Absolutely. I totally think they could, but I don't think they'll get it on that night. I'm going with Purdue. McNeese versus Kansas. I'm riding with the 12 seed. I think Kansas's health will come into play here. They won't be fully healthy. McNeese is a team that can run with them, score with them, and we'll be able to get them out of there. I believe it's definitely controversial for a team that was a preseason number 1, but they're a really good offensive team. I'm reading some stats on them now. 4 of their top 5 shooters shoot better than 40% from 3. I love picking those types of teams in the tournament. Adore it. So I'm going to take them to win over Kansas. Oregon versus Creighton. I'm going to take Creighton in this. I think Oregon is a team that got hot and made the tournament, which I've already said. I don't love picking those teams. I think it'll be enough to get by South Carolina. I think their luck ends there. Texas-Tennessee is a fascinating game for me because Tennessee is another one of those teams where Dalton Connect is obviously an awesome player, but there have been games where he's been shut down and they have just floundered. I mean, look, the first game of the SEC tournament, Mississippi State took them to the post and just dominated them. So I'm worried about Tennessee in this tournament, and I think Texas gets them. I think we're looking at a tournament where Max Asmith is able to ball out, shoot threes really well, and I think Texas gets them, meaning that the 3 and the 7 seed is moving on to the Sweet 16 in the Midwest. Back to the East, we're into the what is this, Sweet 16 now? Yeah, we're into the Sweet 16. UConn, Auburn. What a game this is. And yes, I'm going for the upset. The Auburn Tigers are going to beat the number 1 seed UConn Huskies in this game. Everyone is picking UConn this year. Everyone. Look, it sounds crazy, but when you look at the stats of like repeat champions, teams that win their conference title, there are a lot of red flags for this UConn team not to go far. I know some of those reasons are silly, but I'm not just going to – part of this is like I'm not just going to go with the fold and just pick UConn like everybody else is. And I honestly think this Auburn team can beat UConn. I think they match up with them well. I think Broome can match up with Klingon pretty well down in the post. I think Auburn can shoot the three probably even better than UConn can. I think they can defend them. I like this Auburn Tigers team, and I think they'll get it done versus UConn and upset them to head into the Elite Eight. BYU versus Iowa State. What a game this would be. As I've already said, BYU is the team that I'm picking to be moderately successful in this tournament, but I think I have to say that their luck runs out against Iowa State, and I'm going to take Iowa State to move on to the Elite Eight, meaning that Auburn and Iowa State will be playing for a spot in the Final Four in Phoenix. Next up, we've got the West, North Carolina versus Alabama. This would be a very exciting game. I think North Carolina's defense would really have to show up for this game, but I think it will. I'm not going to be just a Duke homer and pick UNC to lose. I think they have the tools necessary to beat Alabama. I think they can score a lot themselves. Alabama plays no defense, and if North Carolina can even have half the defense they had throughout this year in the ACC tournament, I think it'll be enough to beat Alabama. Baylor, Arizona. I think Arizona cruises. I see all of these games for Arizona almost being easy wins, even the one against Baylor. Too good a roster here, setting up a Destiny's rematch of Caleb Love versus his former team in the Elite Eight. What a moment this would be. Now let's move on to the South. Duke, Houston, number 1 seed versus number 4 seed. This is the game that every Duke fan, I think, is secretly thinking about going into the tournament. This is the game where most people have us losing. Most of the brackets I look at have Duke pretty easily winning their first 2 games and then dropping this game to Houston. Look, I mean, I can't promise you that none of my picks are going to be not biased in this bracket, but I'm going to go with Duke. I think Duke is ticked off enough going into this tournament that they will have the energy needed to beat a Houston team. Duke has played pretty well against teams that consider themselves defensively really well this year. I just think we can score more than 70 on a lot of people that we play. I don't know if Houston's going to be able to contain just the raw talent we have in a guy like Kyle Filipowski or Jeremy Roach or even Tyrese Proctor and Jared McCain. I don't know if they've seen a roster like that all year, and I think it'll be enough to just outscore them, and our defense with the bend don't break mentality can at least hold them to a point total that they're used to getting, and I think we'll be able to trump their defense. So I actually like Duke in this matchup. Again, when I broke down our bracket seeding, I said I wanted to be in Houston's division. Next, we've got Kentucky, Marquette. I'm just going to tell you I'm picking Kentucky. I am betting on the Wildcats being hot throughout their first couple games in the year, and I think Marquette could be lucky somewhat to get this far in the season. Now, if they come out and Kalinick is healthy, it wouldn't be surprising to see Kentucky in this spot. I just don't know how healthy it is, and a key player like that scares me. I think they'll just have enough to squeak by in the first 2 rounds and then lose to a good Kentucky Wildcats team. Purdue versus McNeese. The 12-seed McNeese continuing to make a miracle run here. I just think Purdue's too good for them. I don't think Purdue is going to have an absolute choke job in the tournament like they have in years past. I think they've got that behind them. I'm going to roll with Purdue here. Next up, we've got Creighton versus Texas. And I'm rolling with Texas here. Again, look, I like the guard play. I like the elite guard play that I think Max Abmas gets you. And I enjoy I enjoy watching him play. I think if he is on, he was able to leave Oral Roberts to a run in the tournament. I think he'll definitely be able to leave a team as good as Texas. I think Texas's game against Tennessee before this is obviously, I think, a harder game than when they have to play Creighton. Creighton is a good team, don't get me wrong. I just like the elite guard play that Asmus gives you. When he's on, not a lot of people who can bring him. So that leaves my Elite Eight picks. We've got Auburn and Iowa State out of the East. We've got North Carolina, Arizona in the West. We've got Purdue, Texas in the Midwest, and we have Duke, Kentucky. What a matchup in the South. Let's start in the East. Auburn, Iowa State. Now, this is a tough one for me because I think Iowa State is the more technically sound team. They have not had as bad a losses as Auburn has, but I think Auburn has the higher ceiling here. So it's kind of like a pick your poison. I'm actually going to go with Iowa State here. As much as I love this Auburn Tigers team, I think that the consistency they've shown throughout this year maybe hasn't been enough for me to pick them to win several games in a row like this, especially after defeating a team like UConn. They're going to feel like they can beat anybody, and that might help them, but I've seen that hurt a lot of teams where maybe you feel like, all right, we got the big win out of the way. Now we just have to, not stink, and I think that can bite a lot of teams in the butt. So I'm picking Iowa State to be one of my Final Four teams. I like this Iowa State team. They're well coached. They do everything pretty well, and I think if Auburn is able to take care of UConn in the earlier round, they'll be able to make the Final Four. If UConn wins, I think they'd match up well against Iowa State. But I'm already predicting Auburn to beat the Huskies, so I'm going to pick Iowa State as one of my Final Four teams. North Carolina, Arizona, destiny's coming for UNC. They're going to get Caleb Loved. Arizona will get Caleb Loved, or UNC will get Caleb Loved, and he will get his revenge on his former team and make a run to the Final Four. Duke, Kentucky in the Elite Eight. I actually think if Duke gets past Houston, a lot of people will see this Kentucky game as an easier game for Duke. I think it depends on the version of Kentucky you get. But I'm going to bet at this point Kentucky's hot streak runs out. They're not going to shoot the ball as well. They'll have one of their dip games, which they've been known for this season, and Duke will win. And all of a sudden you look up and we're in the Final Four. I think it's very possible. I think this is a Duke team that can absolutely do it, and I think if the bracket shakes out like how I'm filling it out, I think it's very possible Duke could be sitting in this very position. Next, Purdue, Texas. This is an interesting matchup here. I think part of me wants to pick Texas because of the elite guard play, like I mentioned, but I can't have no one seeds in the Final Four, so I'm going to go Purdue here. I will say, I filled out some other brackets in the past, and this is not what my Final Four is. I'm kind of filling this out a little bit on the fly to make it more fun for you guys to listen to, more than just like a pre-picked thing where I know everything. Some of my brackets look different than this. Some of my brackets obviously have UConn in the Final Four. Some of them have Tennessee even making a run if Connect is able to just stay good the entire tournament. I think there are other teams you could pick that would be interesting. One of my brackets even has BYU making it all the way there with some strong shooting. As much as I love the teams that just bomb away from three, I think they're great in the early rounds for upsets, but to do that 6 games, even 4 to 5 games, 3 to 4 games in a row is really hard. So I like picking those teams in the first couple rounds, and then they kind of fall off to more consistent teams. All right, first Final Four matchup, Iowa State versus Arizona. I think Arizona's too good. I think Iowa State's a great team. They're really well coached. But I think Arizona the talent level for them is just through the roof. Star players everywhere you look. I think they make the championship game in State Farm Arena in their home state of Phoenix. Next, Duke, Purdue in the Final Four. Man, what a matchup. This would be, if it shook out like this would be the game I'd be the most nervous for Duke. I just think Zach Edey could potentially just have a field day against our interior defense. But some great points were pointed out on Twitter when I was watching the Big Ten game where Purdue lost this year, is that the Big Ten officials let Zach Edey get away with so many calls, but just because he's big. No disrespect to the kid. Good for him. I'm happy. I root for his success. Don't root for really anybody's downfall. I just think eventually they're not going to let him get away with what he wants. And if he gets into foul trouble, I think the rest of this Purdue team is just doomed. They're a great team even without him. But when you get to this level of competition, I'd like for you to not be so reliant on one player. I even think like losing Flip to foul trouble would be less harmful for Duke than losing Edey to foul trouble would be harmful for Purdue, if that makes sense. Like, we could play better without Flip than they can play without Edey, I think. So I think eventually the officials will catch up with them. They'll get some whistles, get into foul trouble. And here we are, Duke in the championship game. A rematch of the second game of the year at Cameron. This time, it's at Arizona in a lot of ways. It's in Phoenix, in their home state. And what do you know? Listen, you know what podcast you clicked on today. The podcast isn't called Arizona Blue Central. It's called Duke Blue Central because we're picking Duke to win the national title against Arizona. I'm not going to fill out the score because I'm not going to actually submit this exact version of the bracket. But you knew we were going to pick Duke. Listen, if you know me personally, if you know how I fill out brackets, it's Duke every year. It's Duke every year. But honestly, I do think this Duke team has the potential to do it. I think they have the talent to do it, and I think they have the mentality to do it. They need to come into this tournament playing angry. Not angry at one another, not angry at the coaching staff, but angry at the narrative around this Duke team that there are no dogs, that they're arrogant, they expect things to get handed to them. And I know over the past few weeks it hasn't been strong. The vibes around Duke have not been great. But I'm telling you, sometimes when the vibes aren't great going into the tournament, that's when your team performs really well because they know they have to. They've been shown this week throughout the two losses, any team can beat you, and you're going to have to take games from I loved what Shire said after NC State. He said at this point in the year, teams are not going to go away themselves. You got to put them away. And I think Duke can come out and really put teams away. And I'm going to predict them to win. And now look, if you say I'm picking with my heart here, obviously. If it's not Duke, let's say Duke loses to Houston in that Sweet 16 game, I would still actually probably pick Kentucky to beat Houston in the Elite Eight to make the Final Four against Purdue, but I actually think Purdue would beat Kentucky, and they would be in the championship game against Arizona. So if it's not Duke, my prediction would be Purdue, Arizona, and I actually think who would win that one? That's a tough one. I actually think Arizona would win that game. I think Arizona feels to me like an excellent team who could win it all, and I think they'd be very capable of doing so against even like the likes of Purdue. So if it's not Duke, if you want to be like real that way about it and not let me pick my own team, Houston would beat us in the Sweet 16. They would go on to lose to Kentucky and not make the Final Four. Kentucky would lose to Purdue. It would be Purdue, Arizona, and Arizona would beat Purdue. But yeah, there's my bracket for this year, folks. Probably very wrong, as everybody's is. It's probably not like the perfect thing you could fill out here. But that's it. This is my bracket. There are many like it, but this is mine. Anyway, thank you guys so much for listening and watching. If you've watched me fill this out on screen, it's going to be an awesome tournament season. I hope Duke at least makes it far so it can be very interesting for a long time. I tend to kind of tune out of the March Madness once Duke loses, especially if they lose early. So I always tell people I just like rooting. I just like being into it as long as possible. So just help us go far. And I enjoy Duke's playing on a Friday too, because you just get to fully enjoy the Thursday suite of games without thinking about or without worrying about a Duke game that day. You get to just fully chill out, watch a game of March Madness, and then next day it's go time. But yeah, we'll be coming at you again probably after our first game against Vermont, hopefully talking about a Duke victory in the first round of the NCAA tournament. But thank you, each and every one of you, for listening. Really do appreciate all of you. And last but not least, for the last time before the NCAA tournament, go Blue Devils.